Hey, Skills Champions. It's Rachel Unruh at National Skills Coalition here with my colleague, Katie Spiker for Skills on the Hill. The Senate was in recess last week and Katie and I were as well. But Katie, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
So last week, a lot of activity. The House Ed and Labor Committee marked up and passed their portion of Build Back Better, what's now known as the reconciliation bill. So Katie, what happened? What's in that bill?
Yeah, the House released their text and then marked up, which means the members of the committee sat around and talked about what were the key provisions from Build Back Better that they were going to include in their version of the bill. The committee included over $80 billion of investments in workforce. It included provisions that would fund free community college consistent with the America's Family Plan. It included, for a little bit more detail on what some of the workforce provisions were, the bill included $16 billion that would focus on dislocated workers. It included $15 billion for adult WIOA programs. It included a $10 billion industry and sector partnership grant program. It would re-up the Trade Adjustment Assistance Act, community college and career training program style partnerships with community colleges for $2 billion. This funding was all allocated to Department of Labor and then the programs that would go to education. The labor programs, WIOA and dislocated worker, were all allocated to be to go over to the agency for next fiscal year, which means the agency would then have a lot of jurisdiction over how to spend that money over the next 7 years or 9 years, depending on the different programs. The committee passed their version of Build Back Better. The House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over trade programs and over the tax program, also included in their version of the bill a re-up of tax for $9 billion over the next 7 years. So there were several really key provisions that our network has been advocating for over the past few years and few months around reconciliation that were included in the House bill at levels that we haven't seen included in any of the former bills or conversations that are happening around economic recovery.
Great. So it sounds like there was a lot of good stuff in there, stuff we've been advocating for. As you know, Katie, our CEO, Andy Van Clunen, was in the New York Times last week and on Morning Edition yesterday talking about why these investments are so crucial to make good on the president's promise of equity as an imperative under infrastructure spending, but also just the fact that if we're going to make good on rebuilding the infrastructure, we need to make sure that there's training dollars there to help people who've been displaced from other industries to train for these jobs and help build that infrastructure. One of the key points Andy made on NPR yesterday was that it's kind of in the Senate's hands now, and it's really on them to make sure that these proposed packages don't get cut. So what are you hearing about Senate action?
There's kind of two ways to answer this question. So one is the procedural and process of what has to happen now with the House bill. So once the House, and assuming that the House passes the comprehensive Build Back Better Act, not just the ed and labor provisions, but the entire bill, it will then go over to the Senate. And the reconciliation process and the weedy part and procedural part of this process really happens in the Senate, because the parliamentarian over in the Senate has to decide whether these provisions, any of the provisions under the bill, are relevant enough to fit under the reconciliation process, which means that they have clearly a budgetary impact. And so the House bill that we just talked about includes programming and investments in a variety of different programs that the Senate parliamentarian, even if the Senate adopted, would have to rule as relevant enough to be included in that provision. And so from the foundation, there's just this challenge that'll happen over in the Senate to figure out what are the breadth of programs that can be funded under the process and the structure of a reconciliation bill. The second challenge is where the funding levels are going to fall. So the package as it was proposed originally in the Senate was a $3.5 trillion package. From what we're seeing proposed over in the House, the funding levels could go even above that $3.5 trillion level. And at the same time that the House is trying to inch that $3.5 trillion spending level up, we saw members like Senator Manchin talking recently about the fact that he's really more comfortable voting for a package that's closer to $1 trillion, so cutting the entirety of the package by a third. That obviously means that the Senate is going to have to cut significant parts of programs across the board in order to take a $3.5 trillion package and fit it in a $1 or $1.5 trillion bill, if that's where the Senate goes. But it also puts programs like workforce development even more at risk, because we've seen over the course of the past year and a half that Congress has not prioritized investments in skills for people that need access and success in those programs to get back into good jobs. And so without further advocacy from our network, that will likely continue to still be a challenge. So we've heard from that the Senate numbers that they're talking about for workforce development and for skills training may be significantly lower than what we saw the House Ed and Labor Committee mark up. There has been recognition from the Senate Health Committee on the importance of the free community college provisions and really prioritizing that, but not combined with the investments in workforce development that are going to be critical to expanding and ensuring that community college students have access to training, and students who may be training outside of a community college system and environment will also be able to access and succeed in those training programs.
Gotcha. So, I know we've talked a lot about how vital our network has been in raising the visibility of these programs over the last year or so, and really having a positive influence on what the House did. So what should our folks be ready for in terms of advocacy when it comes to making the case with the Senate?
Well, and that's exactly right. So right now, a lot of our focus turns to the Senate to advocate and ensure that we see numbers and investment levels in the kind of things that we saw under the House bill. So urging the Senate, the Health Committee and the Senate in general to support funding that is closer to that $100 billion level and consistent with the House $80 billion investment level in workforce development. Folks may have seen that we sent up a letter with more than 500 organizations a couple of weeks ago in partnership with national organizations who are part of the campaign to invest in America's workforce. That letter will continue to stay open, and we can share a link when we share this video, where we'll resend that letter as the Senate begins and gets more involved in their negotiations with even more signatures beyond those initial 500, so that we can continue to share the importance of investing in these critical programs. We also, at the same time, will be offering folks the opportunity to thank the members of the House who ensured that the investments proposed as their part of the Build Back Better Act were included at such significant levels at that $80 billion level.
Great. Well, it sounds like there's a lot still for our network to do. Well, Katie, thanks so much for these great updates on what's happening. And of course, we'll be back here again next week to let you know what progress we've made. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Rachel.